Sup fellow degenerates, it's your boy Rot, and welcome back to the channel. If this is the first video you've ever seen by me, then hi, hello, howdy-o, nice to have you here today. On this particular day, I have decided that I want to cover an art community drama and controversy surrounding the jelly art style. Thank you all for voting for it in the most recent poll, by the way. However, I don't want this to just be one of those rehashy tabloid-esque tea videos where I simply repeat the same thing that everyone else has already said, all the while insulting the target mercilessly. I meant it when I said back in my Hi video that I am not a fan of that kind of drama content and don't want to make or participate in it. Instead, I am covering this topic because I feel like the whole thing is a lot more nuanced than people realize and have spoken about, at least to my knowledge, and I think that this is a good excuse for me to talk about the oh-so-important question: when does taking too much inspiration from someone's style become copying it, and my true, genuine feelings about art style theft as a whole. Before I get into that though, I want to stop and take a moment to thank Bone Ink for being a member on Ko-Fi. If you are able to and want to support me monetarily, then my Ko-Fi is down in the card link below. You could either make a one-time donation with a value of your choosing, or you could become a member for some extra perks such as commission discounts, access to my work-in-progress art, and the benefit of having your name featured in videos like this. If you'd also like to order a commission, which are still open, then you could find my prices and terms on the commission terms page of my card. To order one, you just need to DM me on any one of my socials. Before we dive in, I also want to add here that harassment of anyone mentioned here is not okay. Although the subject of today's video was inciting harassment herself, attacking her and being cruel back will not only stunt any personal growth that she might have by making her spiteful of those criticizing her, but also means that you are stooping down to her level and being just as awful. With all of that out of the way, let's discuss the situation. For those of you potentially unaware, Puririkaaa, also known as Riri, is an 18-year-old artist with 300k followers on the hell site that is TikTok.gov. She is well known for being the person who popularized the jelly art style, whose main features are large wet eyes with prominent aegyosals, plump juicy lips, cute but almost forlorn or sad expressions, oftentimes pastel colors, and soft rendering. She came under fire in the last month after she posted a video on TikTok with the caption, "They're just looking up to you. Okay, ... In this video, another artist's work is overlaid on top of her own to imply that her work has been traced by them. Apparently, Riri became aware of this art when someone on her Discord server overlaid the two images. The artist's name will be censored in this video because they are 13 years old and have received enough harassment from this, so I'll simply call them B for convenience, keep that in mind. Rather than contacting B privately to discuss the issue, Puririkaaa incited her fans to harass this much smaller and less socially powerful child. Though I've not seen screenshots for this claim, so take it with a grain of salt, I've also heard several people claim that Riri's call to attack B continued and became even nastier in her Discord server. After the initial wave of bullying was sent their way, proof on B's side was released in the form of a short time-lapse that showed them rendering their artwork step by step. They use Ibis Paint to make their art, which to my understanding does not have one of those hidden layer features that remove certain layers from showing up on time-lapses, which means that they did not in fact trace Riri's work. Instead, they simply referenced it, being a fan of hers before all of this. Besides that, people also started pointing out that Puririkaaa has made tutorials teaching people how to draw in her style. So she explains how to draw in her style and then reprimands people for doing so? Weird. Despite this proof, she has since doubled down, later saying in a live stream that she was happy that the situation happened, would do it again, didn't regret anything that she did, and was getting a lot of attention and money from it.
Actually, I did a lot of the things that I've been called out for, but I'm standing with my point. I don't think what I did was wrong. Like, if I have the chance to do it again, I'll do it again, over and over. I don't know why I'm getting cancelled for calling people out to trace my art. Like, what? After all this whole thing, I got so much views lately, and you know, my TikTok balance is increasing. Like, it's bad, but it's also good at the same time because I'm getting account engagement, like I'm getting more money.
Her and other people's arguments on her behalf have since moved away from accusing B of tracing. The main argument now is that B supposedly stole and copied Riri's art style. Since this all happened, Art Drama YouTube has done what Art Drama YouTube does best, and while fairly critiquing Puririkaaa for her gross and entitled behavior, many have insulted her personally, called her art ugly and unworthy of being protected, and often dismiss any arguments about whether or not her claim of art style theft is valid, and a lot simply say that it isn't without giving it any nuanced thought. Obviously, not everyone has done this. In fact, I'll be linking a video by Rin who goes over the situation in a more measured manner and doesn't really attack Puririkaaa personally, and she talks about the drama aspects of things more than I will if you want to go watch that after this, but a lot of people have been awful and uncharitable in response to her. To be fair, I understand why. Riri has been acting like a little troglodyte, and sending her fans to go out and attack an actual child is pretty reprehensible behavior. Especially since she has refused to retract her statements and has said herself that she is not sorry. I do agree that she is overall the one unequivocally in the wrong. It's also a pattern, as she apparently incited harassment against another minor in the past as well, though I won't get into that situation because it's kind of irrelevant. However, even though I agree with most people that Puririkaaa is in the wrong, completely ignoring an awesome opportunity to talk about the ethics of art style theft is disappointing to me, and belittling Riri and other artists for using this style and claiming that their work is not worth protecting in the first place is just stupid, actually. So with that being said, I'm going to be playing a little bit of devil's advocate here and talking about arguments that, though they do not apply in this situation and do not make Puririkaaa right, might be valid elsewhere. One thing that I heard a lot throughout videos or posts discussing this situation is that because B's work was not traced, it automatically clears them of plagiarism. A lot of people seem to think that art theft begins and ends at stealing and passing the original work off as your own, or tracing and then passing that off as your own. But no, actually, you can plagiarize work without tracing it or stealing the original image. You can, in fact, plagiarize just by heavily copying an already existing piece. I know that the main argument in this whole debacle is more about art style theft specifically and is not about the theft of a specific art piece, but I feel like it's very important to cover this particular kind of art thievery because it's not as widely acknowledged as tracing or blatant image theft is. I actually noticed a lot of similarities between the Puririkaaa situation and a drama that happened roughly about a year and a half ago. In July of 2022, the art YouTuber Omnia, use they/them pronouns if you refer to them in the comments please, got called out when, well, they were called out for a lot of valid reasons, but the important one to this video is that they were called out for plagiarizing the work of an artist called Meg_iCarp. Looking at these two pieces next to each other, everyone could tell that the copying was incredibly blatant, and many took one look at it and assumed that it was likely traced, especially the top one. Up to and during being called out, Omnia deleted comments referring to the plagiarism under the video that the art was featured in and doubled down, trying to get a gotcha on their detractors. They only apologized when it became apparent that they couldn't weasel out of things and wouldn't be able to turn the situation back around on others. Prior to ditching their platform for a few months, they proved that they had not traced actually by providing a time-lapse of the art to Meg and others, and tried to say that because they didn't trace, and because Meg doesn't own the character of Raven, it wasn't plagiarism. They also had a bunch of other excuses, but those are less relevant to mention. So this sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Artist gets called out for tracing, artist provides time-lapse to prove that they didn't, and then it turns out that they only heavily reference the work of someone else. In that case, why is Omnia in the wrong in their situation and B isn't in this situation? Besides the fact that B is 13 and Omnia was 21 when their drama happened, there is a bigger reason than just the ages and maturity of the people involved. Let's talk about the nature of the pieces being supposedly ripped off here. Comparing Omnia and Meg's work together, you can see that Omnia copied the composition of the piece, the expressions, the emotions being conveyed in the piece, the character being used, as well as stylistic aspects of Meg's art, like the specific way that she draws eyes and noses. I would also like to point out that in every single official design of Raven that I've ever seen, she is always drawn with her hair covering her ears, and Meg specifically chose to push her hair behind her ears, something that Omnia copies in their piece. Meg's piece is quite specific and original in terms of the poses and composition, which makes it very apparent how much Omnia actually ripped her off and copied every single facet of the work. It's not just similar, it's the same, minus some of the hands and the fourth Raven included in Meg's work because, I don't know, Omnia might have just gotten lazy or something. Well, I can't really judge them too hard on that one, hands are hard to draw. Taking a look at Riri's work next to B's work, you might be tempted to point out how similar that they look to one another, and with Omnia's work in mind, that means that B's art is a ripoff regardless of the fact that they didn't trace. However, I contest this. Unlike Meg's work, which had a lot of detail and was very specific and original, Puririka's work is shockingly simple. I hate to roast her because I don't really like to make fun of artists, but pretty much all she draws most of the time is the same flat front angle. Scrolling through her Instagram feed, most of her work is just headshots of forlorn, cute goyles staring at the camera. Her work is incredibly samey, so if you think about it, B's work is just about as much of a ripoff of this specific piece as it is any of the others. Riri does not and can't own flat frontal angles of characters staring into the camera, though if she did, her royalties would be insane, dude. The character and colors in B's work are different, and all the similar aspects, like the pose and expression, are too broad of a concept for Riri to stake a claim to. Heck, this piece of rot by me is about as much of a ripoff of Puririka's work as B's if you consider the pose, blank expression, creepy cute themes, and general composition. Send your storm of TikTok girlies after me, why don't you? So the only thing that even remotely makes B's piece similar on any sort of significant level is, well, the art style. Here's the big question that you've all been waiting for. Is art style theft real? For a long time, the community consensus on art YouTube is that art style theft isn't even a thing that exists. In fact, in a cringy video I made almost 2 years ago as a 17-year-old, God, I hate my old videos, LMAO, I echoed this sentiment myself. So has my opinion changed? Can you steal an art style? Well, the answer is yes, but actually no. Let me explain. It is true that all art is derivative of something that already exists. Nothing is original anymore in this day and age, and all artists take inspiration from things that they've seen and enjoy, sometimes even unconsciously. You can't exactly police certain concepts because they are so broad. Aspects of Puririka's work, like the large eyes, aegyosals, big lips, blank expressions, and cute shit, is stuff that's common in not just the jelly art style, but also in styles like anime, creepy cute, and whatever the hell Cooleen's K-pop looking art style is called. Heck, I'd say that the jelly art style itself is highly reminiscent of the faces of ball-jointed dolls. Like, look at the lips and makeup, very similar. The point is, if art style theft was a problem and constituted as plagiarism within itself, then anime companies and artists would be suing the fuck out of each other left and right. Not to mention that if people owned art styles, then that would be intensely restrictive on the creativity of everyone. With that being said, I do think that there are certain specific situations when crying style theft might be kind of fair. It is possible to mimic someone's style almost perfectly. So if B were going around and actively infringing on Puririka's market by either pretending to be her or creating nearly identical pieces to like all of her work, then Riri might have a leg to stand on. But was B doing that? No! I could see someone fairly calling out another person for imitating their work and pretending to be them to sell under their name. But in this case, B was just a kid who looked up to Puririka and liked her style. After all, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. The fact that Riri was specifically making tutorials so that people could learn how to draw features the same way that she does just further demonstrates why this is not a big deal. Now, I empathize with the artists who have very precious art styles and who care about their work a lot feeling offended at being blatantly copied or ripped off. Heck, I've had this happen to me before. I recall a kid directly tracing 2 of my old PFP icons featuring my old Sona to use as their PFP, and I remember how shitty it felt that they were copying and tracing me like that. I empathize with Riri feeling kind of peeved that this literal 13-year-old can render a piece in the same style that she can to the point that they look drawn by the same person. However, the fact of the matter is that this kid didn't do anything wrong. Going after this kid, especially publicly and without contacting them privately first, is the least acceptable option that Riri could have taken. I also just want to add a quick little aside here to say that I am completely fucking done with people roasting the jelly art style, and I say this as someone who doesn't even like it. People attacking and hating on the art of not just Riri, but this minor and others is not okay. I've seen people constantly rattle on about how it's boring or ugly or whatever, and while I think it's fine to dislike someone's style, insulting them personally and going out of your way to roast their work is another ballpark entirely. But just because Riri's behavior sucks doesn't mean you have to burn anything associated with her at the stake as well, like, come on. In conclusion, artistic plagiarism can happen even when a work is not traced. Art style theft can be a thing when people are purposely mimicking someone's work with the intent to deceive for monetary gain. But B is not guilty of these things, and the harassment of them is unwarranted and unnecessary. Puririka's behavior is not justifiable. She has a track record of being aggressive and shitty and sending fans after people, and she doesn't regret it even slightly. Just because she was wrong, though, about B's work being theft does not mean that plagiarism and art style theft can't ever be a valid claim in certain situations. I think a good takeaway for artists in this situation is, ask people before you directly reference their art. Puririka, in particular, creates tutorials, so I understand why people might not have known initially that referencing her art style was not okay to her, but in other cases when someone doesn't actively make tutorials, I think that it might be a good rule of thumb to ask an artist before creating heavily derivative work based on theirs. I've had people ask me if they could trace or reference my work for practice in the past, and the answer is yes, as long as I am credited, and if the work is traced, the post makes note of that. Though, like in the case of B, making heavily derivative work may not be a crime or a serious offense, it's, I think, the morally correct thing to do to ask someone before referencing their art. It's more of a social courtesy type thing, in my opinion. And there you have it. Thank you all for watching if you got to the end of this video, rate and subscribe if you feel inclined to do so, maybe write a comment if you have any thoughts or questions for me. Remember that all of my socials and my Ko-Fi are linked in the description if you want to support me. I still have commissions open if you're interested in ordering one, and I hope you all have a nice rest of your day, and I will now bid you all adieu.